Okay. I want to start with a small story. What got us here? A while back, we had a new hire in the infra team at Optiver. And one of the things that we at the infra team do in Optiver is create, set up new equipment and create DNS records. You can probably imagine that. So this new hire, let's call him Patrick to protect the innocent. Patrick also needed to set up some new equipment, stage that in DNS. So he came over to our team saying, so guys, how do I need to do this? How can I set up these DNS records? Well, I can already hear you thinking the answer. You're probably running a Windows DNS server. That's PowerShell, right? Well, not so much in this case. Patrick joined the networks team within Optiver, and those guys mostly manage their systems from Unix. And yes, we have a fully cross-platform PowerShell nowadays, which we are very happy with. But that does not mean that companies or Unix administrators move that fast as well. So we needed to come up with a different solution for Patrick. So what we said is, well, we have this nice Windows management server here. Why don't you use the DNS management GUI? What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, I'm here to tell you what could go wrong. No, Patrick did not cause a full system outage, if that was what you were hoping for. But some other interesting things did happen, which we were not totally aware of. So Patrick, he decided, well, let's set up my equipment, use the DNS management console, set up my DNS records, and then everything looked kind of normal. Everything appeared to be normal, until some monitoring checks we have in place started complaining about, hey, I cannot find the reverse record for this DNS record. So what's going on there? Long story short, Patrick had been yelling at our DNS server, doing all the DNS records in uppercase. And while Windows doesn't care about that for the forward lookups, it will just answer you, our Unix system that did the monitoring for this part did care about it, because it was expecting the DNS records in lowercase. So yeah, that got us take a step backwards, rethink, okay guys, what are we doing here? Because in situations like this, where there are two options, humans are about 50% consistent, and that's not the consistency we need in our environment. I guess the same counts for you. So what we decided to do was, let's look at a solution that enables other teams to use our automation, but without having to also learn our language. Because that's how we previously did it, and that's how it clearly didn't work. So that's what got us here. I'm Daniel.
I'm Bartosz.
And we're infrastructure engineers at Optiver. Welcome at Beauty is the Beast. So what will we have in this session for you? You will learn what Universal Dashboard is. You understand why we implemented Universal Dashboard and not one of the other products that can also do what Universal Dashboard does. And I promise you, you will be able to build your own REST API in this session within 5 minutes. So if you brought your laptop, if we don't kill the Wi-Fi, we'll get it going. Small agenda, we'll start with the beauty. So the beauty will all be about what Universal Dashboard has in its name, dashboards. It's really something, yeah, we were thinking, okay, can we do a Universal Dashboard session without showing that? Okay, let's at least keep it in. So I'll show you some of the basics on the Universal Dashboard, and then how you can build dashboards with a lot of features. But what we really talk to you about is the beast. And that's the REST API behind Universal Dashboard. That's really where we feel the power is. That's also what you will learn in this session. So, that were all the slides. Let's get some demos kicking. So, first of all, let's just look at the very basics of dashboards. So, this is basically where I've built my own very basic initial dashboard, where, well, this code is just for me to be able to run this script. But here we start the UD dashboard. We create a new dashboard inside there, and UD is built in a way that we have rows and columns, and from left to right, we have columns 1 till 12. So that's also how you format, well, you structure your data, you make sure that it's placed in the right location when you load your page. So here I also did the columns 1 till 12. So I create a column of size 1 for each of them. And if we load this, and I switch to the dashboard, refresh that, we should see indeed, so columns 1 till 12. And this is how you can position your own content within Universal Dashboard. Obviously, that goes in many different sizes. So if we uncomment this part, and let's run again. And I now refresh it. We'll get another row with numbers 1 till 6, with a size of 2. And that's really how easy it is to build your own content within UD, place your own data where you want it, visualize it the way you want it within, well, a few seconds. Let's show some more of that, because when we create only half a row, so this will only fill up half the screen, size 6, what we will then see is that we also on that location will get those 12 items again, where we can structure the data in the same way. So basically this just repeats itself and you can use it that way. And the last thing that I want to show on positioning your data, so to get it visualized in the right way, is that we can also place the data somewhere else. So in this case, I'll have a box with a size 4, offset 2 from the side, and that's how you can do that. Another thing I would like to show you is the difference between content and endpoints. So in the code, you saw me using this content here constantly. So if I now start giving all the boxes a random color, let's do that, and refresh the page. So now they should all get a random color. And when I refresh the page, all the colors stay the same. And that's because this content is loaded when the web page is actually loaded. The nice thing is, UD also has the possibility to actually execute the code at the time the user is refreshing the page. Or even better, auto-refreshing it. So you can draw graphs, for example, that you can visualize your data in. So to demonstrate that, if I make one of these an endpoint instead of content, and we reload the page again, and I now refresh the page, takes a bit of time, but now the colors will constantly change. So that means the moment I'm refreshing the page now, that code is executed. And if you're looking closely, also the numbers have disappeared. And that's because also the variables, that variable that my code is looking at, isn't scoped in this script block. So it cannot find it anymore. So that's something to keep in mind there if you're playing with dashboards. So these were the very, very basics of Universal Dashboard. And just to give you a bit of an idea, okay, what can you do with that? I've recorded a small demo that shows, okay, so what if you have a fully featured dashboard? How does that look? So let's go into that one. So this is again starting the UD, and I see that I probably started the wrong video here, because we had it nicely zoomed in for you, so you could also read it in the back. Let me quickly check that. See, better looking dashboards. That's the one we need. So here we'll set up another dashboard. We'll have some content defined. We'll create a server performance dashboard here. Partially what was available already on the internet, but enriched by us. We have some information in there about our system, what the name is, and that will go on the first half of the page. We'll have a drop-down box that actually allows us to select the network adapter we want to monitor. And with SyncUD element, we can actually see what is, we can make that change visible in another code block. So basically sync up those two elements to look at the right network adapter. So what the network adapter what we'll monitor here is how much traffic we are receiving and how much traffic we are sending in the next. And next part, we'll also have an event log where we can see the logs for both application and system. And again, we have that SyncUD element here so that if we change that drop-down box, also we will be able to view the events of that log in that grid. So that's all handled at the endpoint at that time. So that is some code to get our events back. And next we will draw some graphs. We'll get to be able to see the CPU, the memory, the physical disks, our reads, and the writes of our physical disk. And last but not least, we'll get an overview of all the processes that we have running on this box. So let's have a look at what a dashboard like that actually looks like. And this is really where the visualization performance from UD comes in, because here we can see right away, okay, so I'm looking at a certain network adapter. Let's start downloading a file, and we can see, okay, we're actually getting traffic from that network adapter. If I now switch it to the other network adapter, my Ethernet network adapter, which was not doing anything at the moment this demo was recorded, you don't see any data. Switch it back, and we get data again showing us what's being downloaded at that stage. So this is really how that SyncUD element works with I can select an item and the knob follows. Same for the event log. That will also, we'll be able to show both the logs from the application and the system log, and also be able to open those, look inside them, hey, what's that event about, and close it again, go on with what we were doing. The idea behind this was a bit, this is Windows Admin Center, but maybe you don't need the authentication for this. So you can just open a port on that system and look how it's doing. So we can see the CPU performance, we can see memory performance, physical disk reads and writes, and we can look at the processes that we have running. Of course, we can also filter those. Default feature from Universal Dashboard as well. So we can quickly see, okay, which processes do we have running, and the same counts for the events we have from the event log. So that's what I wanted to show you there. But as said, this was really the beauty part. The power is in the beast. Let's have a look at that. If you took your laptop with you and you want to have a REST API running within the next 5 minutes, put it up now. Oh, that's also the wrong one. So here we will set up the REST API from the start. So if you have a vanilla server, this is how you do it. So first of all, we'll need to have a look at PowerShell get. Because Universal Dashboard requires you to accept a license, that's only a feature that's available in PowerShell get version 2 and up. We need to ensure that we have that version installed. As you can see, I have version 2.13 installed, so good to go there. Next, we need to install Universal Dashboard itself and accept that license. Where, by the way, there is also a Universal Dashboard community module that doesn't have some of the fancy features we'll show you today, like authentication, but it is completely free to use. That is named Universal Dashboard .community, if you want to use that one. So let's wait for Universal Dashboard to be installed.
Question? This one, which is not community, it's not for free?
No, it's not for free, but it's very cheap, in my opinion. The server license cost €99.
Bucks.
Per server, indeed. So, yeah, that was not a lot. Okay. Now we should have all the Universal Dashboard commands available, and we'll be able to author our own REST API. 1 minute in. So to be able to author that REST API, we first need to create an endpoint. So let's set up a new UD endpoint, and in this endpoint, we will start looking at services. So just to get the services from our own box, of course, we will do that with the standard PowerShell command, get service. We'll get the name of that, the status, and convert that into JSON, because that's what the API expects you to output. Let's start that UD REST API. On port 80, so I don't have to specify anything. And if we then use invoke REST method to start calling that API, we'll have a URI, and that's always, well, the name of your box, -API -service. If you get some freaky HTML output, you forgot the -API. I've been there. But next, we'll get all the output of our services on our box. So that was a UD REST API within 2 minutes. Of course, we can make that a bit better, because just now we only got integer output for the status of our service. So that's not really convenient. And it's just PowerShell from this moment on. We can create a custom object, put the name of the service in there, put the status in there as a string, output that as JSON, and the REST API, when we restart it, will also show us that data. So let's be able to make sure that I'm able to restart that API. Okay, good to go. And if we now query the API again, we'll get a nice output with our services with their status. So that's really how easy it is. And of course, that doesn't only work for services, but we can also make a process endpoint and get the processes of our box. So let's do that as well. Get all the processes, convert them to JSON, run the API. And what we will see now is, if we invoke this one, we'll get quite a bit of data back. So, because this is going to convert to JSON all the objects for all the processes, so we might want to apply some filtering there. So I only have the process I want to see, for example. Well, with this colon name in the URL, that's one of the ways in Universal Dashboard to actually pass in parameters to the script block that is executing. So if I'm creating a parameter name here, that one will contain the data of what I specified in colon name. So then we also need to filter on the name, of course. And let's start Notepad to just have a processes that I know that is running on this box. And now we can just look up that process through our REST API by just looking at all the processes named Notepad. Like that. Also, that makes it very readable for everyone who is using your API on how to structure this. Of course, it's not only able to get things, it's also able to destroy things. Even better. So, in this case, I'll have the API stop a process. And that we can do with delete. So, if we invoke the API again, and we zoom out, we'll actually be able to see Notepad again running in the bottom. So over there, let's watch it closely. Boom. And that's how we stop process. But it's really to show, yeah, you can also modify your system with this. Okay. Handing it over to you.
Thank you. So far what the demo showed is how to run Universal Dashboard interactively. That's not something you would normally put in production because you don't want to log in every morning and just run PowerShell and start the dashboard, hopefully. So we have multiple alternatives to do that this way. The supported ways include running it as a service, so like actual Windows service. Another option is to run it within IIS as a web page. Kind of fits there. There's also option to do that with Azure, but because we kind of had to do that internally, that we didn't really spend too much time on, so we cannot really demo that one because we really didn't do that ourselves. So because that's kind of boring to go through all the steps to get this going, I will again follow Daniel's footsteps in this case and just run the video for you so we can actually walk through this step by step. So first one is running it as a service. So UD has a built-in command that allows you to expose your dashboard as a service. And the name speaks for itself. It's publish UD dashboard. First, you obviously need to have this dashboard. I'm creating a dashboard that doesn't do anything interesting. It's just the default one, which is also very nice when it comes to UD because it gives you the idea what the abilities the UD has. It creates some kind of template where you can see all the features. So if you just start UD dashboard without any content in it, it will just give you the very basic page, sorry, not basic page, it will give you the page where you can see all the features. So now I'm specifying that the dashboard file that I want to publish. And once I'm done with it, it will actually copy this file to the module folder, which is, in my opinion, not the best choice. And we'll create a service without even asking you what the name of the service should be and other things like that. So the name is just Universal Dashboard. So whenever you want to update it or create the next one to it, it will not work because it will overwrite the previous one. And you can see here that it's actually running in the module folder, and it's running with the special parameter run as service. That's going to be important when we will try to do that ourselves. So if I open the dashboard file that was copied over to the module folder, you will see that's exactly the content that we had there before when I specified the path to to the dashboard file. So it's my start UD dashboard port 81. I didn't want to conflict with anything running on port 80. That's why I changed the port. And if I start it, I get the page. And as I mentioned, you get the very nice overview of the functionality that exists in UD if you run it like this. So that gives you an idea what else you can do, the things that we didn't really touch in our simple dashboard. Again, we've tried to focus on the beast part, not on the beauty part. We are not really candy toys kind of people. We like to do things rather than watch things. The next off is I'm trying to show you how you can do it yourself without using the publish UD dashboard, because as I said, you're kind of limited by it. So first things first you need to create your location. So I'm doing that in the CSVC folder. I'm creating my dashboard file. And the next thing I do, I'm just getting all the files from the universal dashboard, and I'm copying them over to the same location where I have my dashboard file. And then I'm creating a new service. I name it wherever, because now I'm in control, so I can name it my own UD. And the only thing that is important is that the binary path name has to be almost identical to the one that Adam is creating for you when you just publish UD dashboard. So in this case, I just specify the path to universal dashboard server.exe with run as service. Another thing that Adams is doing is starting the service immediately. New service won't do that for you, so we need to start it. And just to show you the comparison, I'm trying to get the instances of the universal dashboard and mine own UD. So those two things that were created on the machine, they both run dashboards. So that shows you how you can have multiple dashboards running as a service on a single box, which may be convenient, especially when you consider the things like licensing and whatnot. So as you can see now, the path name, maybe it's not that visible because of the truncating, but it's almost the same in the sense that it's just the path to this universal dashboard server.exe -run -s -service. So now I'm starting the service. It's ready. It's expecting the communication on the port 82. So I'm going to start my browser with this port. And again, I'm not getting any specialized or adjusted pages. This is just the default dashboard that you get if you start UD dashboard without any dashboard object provided to it. So this is how you would do that if you want to run it as a service. When it doesn't make sense, I think any time when you just need features of this running continuously 24/7, and for some reason you don't want to run it in IIS. For example, you don't want to have extra overhead that IIS will definitely provide here. So this is the first one. The second one is, let's say you actually decided to do that in IIS. How can you achieve that? So first things first, you need to verify, and I think it applies to any other version of UD, you need to verify that you have proper version of .NET. And it has to be obviously the same, depending on the version of UD, that changed over time. At the moment, it's at least 4.7.2. You can have newer version if you insist. I was actually running it on my Windows 10 where I had 4.8 or something like that. It worked just fine. Next off, you need to make sure that you have, so this is the code we use to verify that we have proper version of .NET. So I'm actually repeating what the page from Microsoft was telling me to do. So next thing you have to check is server hosting that has to be installed in order to run it in IIS. That's only there, it's required. So obviously you need to have IIS installed. That's not a natural requirement. We need to, for our purposes, we also need Windows out. And for the things like Daniel was presenting, the communication between different controls, you also need this WebSockets because that's what it's using behind the scenes in order to, you change the list here and it knows that it should update the graph somewhere else, right? So I'm just verifying that I have web features installed. I'm good to go. Next off, I have to install this .NET Core package. It changes over the version of Windows because Daniel told me that on 2019 he had to install newer version of it. For me, I was running it on 2016, so I was using hosting 2.1.5. I believe you were using 2.2 something, right? 2.2.5. So we installed it. Unfortunately, I did it in the GUI. So yeah, when Daniel saw that, he was just frowned for a moment, but then he kind of regained his breath. But yeah, you can obviously run it without unattended, and we actually do that in our DSC configuration for our UD boxes in-house. So once you have this installed, you can prepare your first website with UD, and the method to do that is very similar to what we did before. So you need to make sure that you have a location for it. You have to have the files from the module in there. And then once you have all those ingredients in there, you can create a website that points to this folder. So I'm creating the folder, I'm making sure that my website is running from this folder. Next thing is, again, I'm collecting all the files from the Universal Dashboard and copying them over to this folder so that they are actually there. So UD will be able to find them. And sometimes you need to modify the web config over there as well if you need to enable or disable certain features, but that's just IIS work. I'm not going to focus on that one too much. And the next is you just need to create this dashboard PS1 file, which is expected to be in the same location where is the root of your IIS website. So now, and one thing important for IIS that I almost forgot to mention, if you pay attention, there's a difference in the way I call UD dashboard for this one. Because unlike the service where we just run the start UD dashboard, here I have to start UD dashboard minus wait. Please don't forget it, because then you will get weird errors from your IIS. I was debugging it for like 20 minutes before I realized that I forgot this simple switch. So don't be me. And with that, I will hand it over back to Daniel.
Yeah, because, well, we now have Universal Dashboard running inside of IIS. And that also means we can now start taking leverage of the nice features that combination gives us. One of the reasons we chose Universal Dashboard, I promised I would tell something about that, is that it also supports authentication of users. Also with Windows integrated authentication. And that's really something what we were looking forward to, because that means that our users that already have an Active Directory account, we can just give them permissions to our APIs. So that's what I will show you in the next demo. And I have a nice reminder there that I should switch to the domain controller, because otherwise So let's do that. So this demo I divided up in two parts. We first are about authentication. So that's really your identity on the web server. And the next part is authorization, and that will show how you can assign a specific role to a specific user. So we have a few requirements for Windows authentication. I made two small tests for that. First of all, we need to have Windows authentication enabled on the website where UD is running. In this case, it's just my default website. And second of all, in the UD configuration, in its web.config, we need to have this forward Windows auth token set to true. So let's verify if that's all still the case. Yes, it is. So we should be good to go.
Yeah, and by the way, by default, it's false. So I also spent significant amount of time figuring out why it doesn't work before I read the web config. So that's why I mentioned the web config read might be necessary.
Yeah. So if we now go back to IIS and actually start using that, restart the website. If I now open my browser here, and yes, I was trialing this before, so let's close it and open it again. Oh, that's not. And let me connect to the website we just started. And what it should do now is prompt me for my username and password. Well, luckily it does. So I'll input my credentials. You have to believe me in the back. And what it does now is actually it recognizes me as being Daniel on the UD PSConf domain. So that's the authentication part. On authorization, like I said, we can also give different users different permissions. So if we look at the code for that, we first have a function here to figure out what the SID is for a user. That's not that interesting. But after that, we'll create two claims. So very simple demo here, just a file, one user can modify it, and the other user can only read it. So that's what I've set up here. And that the users that are allowed to read this file, those are in the UD regular group, and the modify users are in the UD admin group. So for those, we set up an authorization policy, and we execute this has claim. And basically, if this block of code returns true, that means that user is granted access. If it returns false, it's denied access. So those are there for both the file read and the file modify. And next, I also have to do that on the endpoint side. So I'm setting up a new endpoint with a get method, and the authorization policy there is that everybody who reads it is allowed, or in the UD regular group. And on the file modify, we have that UD admin group that is actually able to, well, modify this file as well. And in this case, that means adding a line to that file with the psconvu rocks. So let's close this one and actually make that active on IAS. And next I have two users set up. So this is my UD admin user, and I'm
afraid you closed the other window.
And I'm afraid my UD test user is gone. Oh, come back.
Don't be shy. By the way, is all this clear so far for you guys? Okay.
Is it possible to use single sign-on or?
Yeah, so generally it works. I will demo it later with use default credentials for REST endpoints, because that's normally how we call it. So it's definitely possible to use integrated authentication with it. That's why we chose to do this solution versus anything that requires you to have basic authentication.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When you run as a service, I guess it's running its own little web server?
So the question was, when you run as a service, what happens? So I believe it's just running this .exe file, and that's using the .NET Core libraries to pretend to be web server. But probably the details, the technical details, how it behaves, I would have to look up the documentation, because I really didn't pay too much attention to what is actually happening. But it's definitely just running on the .NET Core, because that's how Adam programmed that. It's running on .NET Core, ISP.NET Core, and stuff like this. And there was one more question, and then we can probably proceed.
Can you also use it as an input form?
Yeah, so the question is, can you use it as an input form? Definitely you can. We didn't have enough time nor push to do that, because as Daniel mentioned, most of the people that we were programming it for are people that prefer command line anyway. So the only problem they had was that they refused to use PowerShell, not refused to use command line. So that's why we didn't really program the GUI. Next step, because we have some colleagues that also don't like command line utilities at all, we are thinking about using the same infrastructure to build some GUIs around it. But that's definitely possible with UD.
Yeah. So to dive into the question right away, does it support single sign-on? Yes, it does. So if I invoke that REST method and I do a simple call on that file API that we just created, and I specify use default credentials, this one will actually connect to that endpoint with single sign-on and give me the line back for that psconf demo. If we now change the method to post, we will actually see that that call will not succeed for this user. And that's because this user is not allowed on this endpoint. If we go to the admin user though, and we do the same call there, so it will also be able to get, that works the same, but this user will also be able to post there. Well, we don't get any feedback from that, but if we run the get again, we'll see that that line psconvu rocks was added. And that is then also readable again by the user that has only read permissions. Oh, then you do need to execute the read. Yes, get please. There we go. And that's how easy it is to set up, based on Active Directory groups, authentication and authorization in UD. So let me switch back to the demo code, and let's see what happens if we try to do what if.
Yeah, so one of the problems that we faced while working on it is that our Linux folks, they very often have this idea that they would like to have a dry run. And we say, perfect, PowerShell has what if, let's use it. The problem was that what if doesn't really work in this scenario because the thing that it outputs is not really something you can capture. And that's something you need if you want to send this as an object to target. So I will show you very, very briefly. This is the first function that we had. That one is using just what if. So if I run this one and I try to capture the output, it will not capture anything. So output is null. But if I program it myself, then I can cheat a little bit and say, okay, add the switch minus dry run, and now the output is actually an object, and I can actually send it over to users, which is not very convenient. I would rather have this what if, which is kind of like a built-in feature in PowerShell commands, and just whenever they want to have the dry run, just run the command with what if and have it, well, my job is done, right? I'm basically finished, and it works the same regardless if you use the UD or you connect to the PowerShell directly. The problem is that in the current version, and we're told to report it as a bug. Hopefully you can vote it up and say, okay, we need it too. So what if would be nice to have it as another stream that you can capture. It can be information stream. I don't really care where it lands, as long as I can capture it and do something about it. So if we look at our script for the UD with what if support with dry run, I can scroll down now, and here you can see that if person has rights to modify the file, but is calling the remove file API with the getter, so they actually don't want to modify anything. What I will do is, I'm cheating here a little bit, so smoke and mirrors, but in general, I could put some command here and just return the dry run result. So if I modify the UD now to actually use that one, let's go back here. If we do this, then if I go back to, let's try with the admin user, that's the run. So if I try to run file remove file, yes, that's how I call it. So if I run file remove from this guy, and he has rights to remove files, but he's calling a get method, he doesn't remove the file immediately, he gets response, okay, this is the path, this is the action I will take on it. So that's exactly what they wanted. In the end, we used it in different scenario. I will get to that later, hopefully, because we are running out of time. But basically, that's how we programmed the what if. The next thing we figure out, okay, after some time, people started to come back to us and said, oh, you know what? I run this command and it doesn't give me the right results. Something is broken. So instead of believing them, because we are not very trusty people, we don't trust them just because they said it was broken, we started to audit things. And also that helps because you need to know what happens with the something that's crucial for you. And because we were building that for DNS, you definitely don't want to know when somebody is deleting half of your DNS zone, just to ask them why they are doing that now. So we wanted to add some kind of logging. And basically, we just came up with a very simple function for that, which all it does is just is a very thin wrapper on write event log, so it captures the things that are actually given to you as part of the REST API. So you have your user, you have requests, and all this information you can move over to the event log, and then you can capture that and send it over, and you know what happened, what method where was called by whom, and what parameters the person specified. So if you look at the actual...
And to clarify those users and request parameters. That is what UD gives you by default. So you don't have to do anything about that yourself. Those are just there for you.
So if I try that, replace, so basically we did modify, I'll not get in that because we were running out of time. Basically for each command, for each path that we had, we added this logging. So now if I restart the page and I start doing something, not necessarily smart, what will happen is that now I can see, okay, what the person did. Okay, not what I expected. Okay, so probably Daniel doesn't have rights. PD, let's run it with different user. So that's again where the whole idea of the API works. So as you can see here, it says cannot find path, right? So I see that he specified a parameter, but this is not the parameter I was expecting. Therefore, I see the error message, but he comes to me, your API doesn't work. I said, wait a minute, let me see. What did you send? Oh, I sent this name foo. And I say, well, you actually did not. So I can not only see what the actions were, but also all the parameters and everything is possible to see here. And also I can run this like this. And then because we save it as a JSON, we can convert it back to something that we can use. By the way, guys, do you mind if we continue with our demos, or do you want to ask questions now? We are fine with both. We can continue the demos after a few rounds of questions, because we have still plenty of code to show, and we'd love to show you that to you. Okay, I don't see anybody complaining about it, so we'll move on. Thank you.
So where we're also using this is for products where regular monitoring is a bit difficult. For example, in our build pipeline, we're using some products from Atlassian, which don't really set themselves up to be monitored easily. But what those products can do is actually, at the end of their build, for example, send the results somewhere, which can go to our API, for example. Some other products I know about is VMware Log Insight, for example, that also has this ability to set up a webhook and then send the results to a REST API, and that's something we can now create ourselves. So if we look at that, this is just our super simple send build result script that, usually it gets the result out of our build pipeline, but in this case I just hard-coded the messages there, and what this will do is just call our API here, and then send that information about, was the build failed, or did it go successfully, what was the message with it, etc. So if we and this would be the UD endpoint that we would set up for that. Just an events endpoint, and we'll parse the incoming details, because what we noticed is that although JSON is able to preserve data types, everything that comes in is a string anyway. So we need to parse it. And what it will do, it will write to the event log, in our case to the application log, and then write that data there. So if we start this API, and then run our build result script. This is for the DSC repository. And if I now get my logs from my application log, we'll see that we just sent in an event that told us, hey, your build DSC 1337 succeeded. And this is just one example, but there are a lot of more products where this webhook is definitely becoming a thing, and which will enable you to use it. But as said, we mainly created this for our DNS part. So let's show them that.
Okay, guys, and gals. Next off is the DNS stuff. So we have monitoring, we have auditing, we have authorization, we have authentication, all the things, all the ingredients we need that in order to allow people to come to our DNS and say, I want to delete this record, I want to create that one, I want to move CNAME from this box to another box. And all those things we programmed in this API. So now Patrick, when he comes to us, he can actually use the API instead of the GUI. So let's just restart it. I won't go into details for the code. Let's play with actual API. So first off, another person, Anna, she came to us. Guys, I heard that you have this new DNS API. It's REST, right? And we said, yeah. Why? We're expecting some kind of bash or somebody complaining that it doesn't work. And the question from her was, okay, but you know, guys, I would love to have a way to get the list of the CNAMEs on the given host. Can you give me that? It's like, sure, I mean, just like 3 lines of PowerShell code, right? So why not? And that's what we did. And Anna was very happy. So I can actually show you how it behaves, hopefully. Or maybe not.
I think this was the part of the scheduled endpoint.
Yep. So we actually use schedule endpoint, which sometimes takes some time before they actually capture data, but they also make things work faster. And in this case, it was really important to get all the data because, yeah, obviously the DNS is not that dynamic, and it's nice to have all this data somewhere so that they can receive information. So as you can see now, in the format that she requested, because I didn't come up with the format as you can see here, she was able to actually run it like this. Next off, we had requests to get the CNAME swap. So CNAME swap, what the way they see it is that they have a box with the CNAME, and when they move application, rather than change the configuration files, they would use this. They would move the CNAME with the application and expect other applications to communicate with the right DNS entry. So in this case, I'm running this dry run again, just to show you how it behaves normally. So as you can see now, it would just remove the CNAME that exists on the box. So it's something that might not be desired by the person that was doing it, and will create another DNS record for it. So that one will fail unless I do this first. Sorry. That's what happens when you test things before presentation too much. So let's just delete guy, and now we're gonna create it, pretend like nothing happened, and smile so that nobody noticed that I'm stressed about it. So basically here I'm creating CNAME using the same API, and the person that requests that, she or he can provide the information they need. And if they want to delete it, they can try like this, but it won't work because of the body parameter that this actually doesn't really accept, which is something I would love to, but it doesn't work. And also you have to keep in mind that it's, again, this authorization, authentication is important here. So if I tell the normal user to use, okay, guys, I want to delete DNS record, he will get nothing back because he's not allowed to use this API. It's only his admin account is allowed to do that. So now if we try to resolve it, because we tried to delete it, that didn't succeed, we still see it in DNS. So if you want to delete it, unfortunately, the way so far we are only doing it is with putting this data in the URI. So this question mark, parameter, and then value, which in turn works. And now if we try to resolve it again, it's not gonna work because there's nothing to resolve. Okay. Any questions? So all the slides and demo code will be available in the repo as usual. So to summarize, now Patrick, when he comes to us, he knows the answer won't be use GUI for DNS changes. We are happy because he's not breaking DNS. He's happy because he's not leaving his whole comfort zone, right? So all are happy. So remember, there's whenever you have a chance, you should use Universal Dashboard, a beast, to make sure that your colleagues are enabled to do what they need to do. So you can also use the beauty part, what gentleman was asking for. So if you have users that are not command line users that prefer to use GUI, you can also build those GUIs on top of your universal dashboard. So remember, the universal dashboard is for you to use. You can utilize it. You can enable your colleagues. So you have no excuse that they don't use PowerShell anymore. Because if you say that they don't use PowerShell and therefore they cannot do anything with DNS, you are lying, because they can if you enable them by creating the UD endpoint for them. So remember, UD, Beauty, SDBs, as long as you wake it up. Thank you very much.